Screven, you're about to come out of your seat to answer something. I'm going to set you up with a question, okay?
Okay.
It seems to me, anyway, that President Obama is getting closer and closer into a position where he's kind of getting in people's faces, being more aggressive in his campaign, kind of playing all kinds of cards, the race card, the gender card, the economic class card. If he is, will it work?
I think it will, and I think he knows what's coming. We've seen in the super PAC spending of Governor Romney, over 95% of their super PAC spending has been negative. It's been a very negative campaign, and that's going to transfer to the general. It has to. We were talking in the last segment about the fact that, you know, they're going to have to, at some point, get off attacking each other, and they're going to have to go after. Nobody's laid a glove on the president. But to answer your question, and I wish I could take credit for this, but James Carville once said, if you have your fist in their face, they can't hit back. And so I believe that's what you're seeing with the president. He's going to start throwing punches. While they're throwing punches on each other, he's going to start throwing punches on them under the theory that they can't really hit back at this point. As we talked earlier, they're going to go through May or June of their own nominating convention. They're going to have to focus on each other. Meanwhile, he's going to start focusing on them.
Well, you know, people complain a lot of times. They say that they don't like negative campaigning. But I think from the viewpoint of people around this table, we would all say that it works. Is that correct?
Indeed it does. It does work. And look, it makes all the sense in the world for President Barack Obama to run a negative campaign. He can't run his record. He doesn't want, he's running away from his record. He wants to focus on the negative aspects of his opponents. So that makes, from a political perspective, he does best when he's campaigning against something else. And he's going to create a lot of boogeymen out there to run against to scare the American people into reelecting him.
Well, Steve, let me jump in real quick on that.
I
mean, I didn't get to answer this last time.
Go ahead.
I mean, running away from what? He's gotten us out of 2 wars we didn't need to be in. He found Osama bin Laden and killed him, which was a very risky political move and the right thing to do. The economy is improving. And what the Republican Party and these candidates were saying before was the economy, the economy, the economy. He hadn't done anything. Now that it's improving, well, it would have improved better under us. I mean, the economy is getting better. They have nothing to talk about. Usually with Democrats, they attack us on foreign policy. His foreign policy record is stellar. So they're coming back and they're looking for things to attack him on. So now it's gas prices. And Speaker Gingrich has a magical formula to bring gas prices down to $2.50 as he's elected. That's all just crazy talk.
But what is Barack Obama doing to lower gas prices? I mean, why is that not a legitimate issue? That is something that impacts everybody at the pump.
Trying to sit down with Iran.
It is a huge issue.
Because I know a little bit about gas being from Louisiana and oil. And the problem is speculation and the threat of Iran closing the straits, some of the issues we have in Libya and Syria, and he's over there trying to open up dialogue.
He shut down the pipeline. He shut down the pipeline, which would have been a source of energy for us. It would have helped us, you know, reduce the cost of energy. He hasn't opened drilling where it's responsible and safe to open drilling. It's shocking to me that you think, Screven, and you should know better because you are from Louisiana, that you think that he is actively engaged in giving us an energy policy that is going to lower gas prices.
They've done more permitting in the Gulf than they ever had, even under President Bush.
They've shut down more permitting in the Gulf.
Well, we had to. We had a leaking well down there. We had to shut it down.
We're not talking about the BP well. We're talking about on California.
And most of the oil selling, as you know, is not in our waters. You know, we've talked about. I mean, some of the Republicans are talking about drilling the Everglades. That doesn't lower gas prices.
No, we're not advocating for that. I'm just advocating for a cohesive energy policy that would allow us to control our energy future, which he has not done.
And we've talked about solar and wind, and your Republicans in Congress keep shutting it down. They won't open it up.
You can imagine the Republicans in Congress have a problem when you have the Solyndra scandal, where members of the Obama administration gave a $500 million loan to people who gave political contributions to President Obama's election campaign, and President Obama shut down the Keystone Pipeline, which would have brought a lot of energy from our friendly neighbor to the north,
we
Canada.
need our boxing gloves.
No, this is, ladies and gentlemen who are viewing this show, this is the campaign. This is what we're going to be. Let's turn for a minute, though, to Florida. We were talking before the show, Sally, about the Florida environment. In some ways, it's paradigmatic, if I can use that term, of the nation in many respects. let me put this out there. How can Obama, and I think everybody would say President Obama can win Florida in 2012. How can he? And let's turn it around too. How can the Republican nominee win Florida? What has to be done? What are critical success factors on both sides? Okay, who wants to go?
Well, Florida is a microcosm of the nation, as we've talked about many times on previous shows. And it's interesting because the electorate that probably will represent the biggest swing electorate are Hispanic voters. And so our state certainly is representative of that. And I think, I don't want to move a little further to my left. Screven is always seated to my left. I don't want to move in that direction. But I would have to say this is a challenge that Republicans face. Our message on Hispanics, I think, has a ways to go before we reassure Hispanic voters on what we actually believe. And I think this is a place that will be a challenge for us going forward. Hispanics, like all independent voters, want economic opportunity. That's an advantage for Republicans. But I think our rhetoric has been too harsh on immigration, and so that does leave an opening for the president with a state like Florida.
Scruton.
So I can take my boxing gloves off now and agree with a lot of what Sally said. I mean, I think she's right. Florida is a microcosm of the nation. I think what we're going to see, I think the Hispanic vote is very important to this state and nationally. We were talking earlier about the West. It's very important, which may lead us to see the continued discussion about Senator Rubio on the ticket with the eventual nominee, but also the independents. The Democrats, unlike 10, are going to be fired up and energized and turn out. I believe the Republicans ultimately will be too, even though we've seen in a lot of these primary states, including Florida, Republicans are not turning out like they have before because of some of the stuff that's going on in their primary. Independents are going to be key. And right now, I think the Republicans are hurting themselves with independents, and Barack Obama is talking to them. And I think that is why we can win Florida.
Justin, who's going to have the best ground game in Florida in the general election?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm not sure. We know that the Obama campaign is already here organizing. They're already setting up campaign offices. They're already doing a lot of grassroots organizing. But at the same time, they need to be doing that because the president doesn't have a primary. One of the benefits of running in a presidential primary, and we saw that here in Florida on January 31st, is that the different campaigns had to have a campaign organization in place. They had to have a ground game to win the primary, and that motivates Republican voters, millions of Republican voters, to actually show up and vote for their presidential nominee. Those voters are more likely, once they've voted in a primary, they're more likely to show up in a general election. The Democrats haven't really had that to motivate their base. So I don't know if I agree complete with Screven. I think that the president is going to have a little bit of a base enthusiasm problem. I think that the enthusiasm, so-called enthusiasm gap may favor Republicans, actually, in the general election. Okay,
Screven, the race for the United States Senate, we have an incumbent, Bill Nelson, Democrat, been there for a while, and I think people would say he's probably the favorite in many respects as an incumbent. He's going to be facing off against probably either Congressman Connie Mack or former U.S. Senator George Lemieux. Handicap that race for us. How do you see it?
Don't you mean he may pair off against the Charlie Sheen of Florida? Is that,
or someone who is amoral? I mean, I know the Republicans are throwing bombs at each other.
When I said earlier that you choose somebody based on whether you want to have a beer with them, I think that may be taken. It's interesting, Steve. I think this race is very much like the national race. You have the Republicans fighting it off, and when we're talking about the Charlie Sheen, that was Senator Lemieux's comments about Connie Mack, and I believe that race is really going to get nastier and more negative as we go on. Nelson, on the other hand, what is he doing? Well, two things. He's sitting back letting them fight and letting them get the press, raising money, which is very important in a state where you have 10 media markets. But he's also, again, on the issues. I saw recently where he was working in Congress to work on NASA and the jobs and what our direction is for space, but also in keeping our jobs with NASA. So he's getting press on issues that Floridians care about, raising money and waiting on the eventual nominee.
But a lot of these races, not just in Florida but around the nation, in terms of Senate races or races for the U.S. Congress, are really driven by the presidential and a presidential year. The messaging will flow from the presidential candidates, and you'll see that impact these races. In answer to what Bill Nelson is doing, he's doing nothing. I mean, he's done nothing as a U.S. Senator. Name something great that Bill Nelson has done for Florida. I mean, this is the debate over Bill Nelson. I mean, he has occupied a seat. He is sitting back and waiting, as Scrubbin has said, for our nominee. So I feel very good about this race in the context of the presidential, and I think whether it's Connie Mack, who certainly has the name ID and the resources available to be a strong general election candidate, or it's George Lemieux who occupied the seat, we're in a good position in that race.
Justin, last word, just a few seconds.
Yep, I would agree completely that the U.S. Senate race in Florida will be mostly determined by what happens in the presidential race and the state of Florida's economy.